What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Smeshcast podcast, episode number 4. We just had Frankie Edgar versus Pedro Munhoz. We are a bit of a smaller podcast than usual. We only have myself.
Yeah, I don't know
Noah.
what is up, guys. Is it's just me?
Yeah,
it's just me.
No, what is up,
What's
guys?
up,
To everybody
guy?
else. This isn't to you, Noah. This is for everybody. This is for the fans, the millions of fans we have watching around the world.
I absolutely disagree. This is for me. This is all for me.
Well, I do it for the fans.
My ego.
You do it for you, and everybody wins. Well, that being said, I think we all won.
Especially the fans.
Well, I think all of us won. You, me, the fans, everybody included, won last night with that epic main event between Pedro Munhoz, Frankie Edgar. That was crazy. Honestly, I've got to apologize before we start this off, before we go too far in here. I talked a lot of shit about this card. I was saying, what is going on? The UFC is putting together terrible cards. We only actually had 9 fights. We had a bunch of fights fall out. But the fights we did have were absolutely crazy. We had some huge upsets throughout the night. And honestly, I think the Weasel is right when he says that the worst cards on paper are the most fun cards to watch.
Oh, got to agree. And like really on paper, this one, I mean, I think everybody really thought this card was really just being carried by like an old champion, an old name.
Really?
And you know, when you have cards like that, you know, they're kind of, it's a toss up. You know, some of these old guys, you know, you never know. Maybe they've lost a step, especially when, you know, I mean, Frankie Edgar was coming down. He came down a weight class, if I'm not mistaken.
A second weight class. Like,
Yeah,
he used to be 155.
Remarkable for a man of his age to go down.
And now he's going down again. Well, here's the thing, though. With Frankie, they always were saying, dude, why are you not fighting at 135? And he was fighting at 155 for years. He was a champion at 155. And so he's like...
yeah, well, you look good. You know, he's always been... He's a small guy, you know?
Yeah, but it's just like, if he's a champion, why go down?
Yeah, I mean, Frankie, I think he really surprised everybody because you never know. You know, it's a toss-up situation when you get some of these older fellas, especially when it's something as drastic as a weight class shift. I mean, we just saw Gustafsson just had an unsuccessful weight class shift as well. You know, it's a real big risk when you do something like this. But man, he was moving quick. He had you know, the gas tank to last, which, you know, is a given. And those combos he was throwing, I mean, Munhoz was throwing, you know, heat. And he was throwing these nice little 1-2 combos and throwing in some really phenomenal shots. But man, for every like leg kick he'd throw, and those leg kicks were, you know, clearly causing some damage. But I mean, Edgar was still moving, you know, throughout the fight. I mean, he slowed down for sure. In was it 3 and 4, which I give to Munhoz.
3 and 4 Munhoz, yeah. But I mean, the big difference here though was, I guess, with the Gustafsson. This was one of the rare times that you actually see a fighter moving down. Class, not
you
up.
Never see that. It's a much bigger challenge.
And here's the reason why, right? Everyone's always going to be competing at the weight class they think they have the best chance to win, and that's generally the one where they can be as big as possible in comparison to the other guys. Frankie fought at 155 for years, then 145 for years, very successful in both, champion and won multiple title shots in 145, but he was always a 135er. And so going down, I think, was the right call. He was at that point in his career where there really was nothing else. He was not getting another title shot at 145. He had already lost to Volkanovski and to Holloway and to Aldo. He really had nothing else to do at 145.
Absolute killers.
But the thing is about this one that really worried me was, he was going down in weight class, which he hasn't done before. And generally it's not a big deal, but I would have expected, if anything, him to be a 135er his whole career, and at this point in his career go up to 145. Usually you don't see guys at 38 years old going down weight classes. That usually as you get older, it's harder to cut weight. And not only that,
you lose that speed. That speed is one of the first things that you lose.
And it's a speed. It's a few things. I don't think you necessarily lose the speed. I think it's that the speed advantage isn't there anymore. So it's like you're the same speed, but when you go, everyone knows that higher weight class you are, the slower the guys are. So if you go down a weight class, you might stay the same speed, but everyone else is faster than you're used to. And so you don't have the advantage anymore. But the thing that worries me when you go down is 2 things, and that's cardio and that's chin. And chin especially worried me here because, yes, Frankie is a tough guy, right? Real tough motherfucker. But he just got finished in his last fight against Korean Zombie, and he took hard damage, and that was following just a few fights after hard damage against Ortega. So
again, a guy like Korean Zombie, another killer. This guy's the only people who are taking him down are absolute best of the best.
Exactly. So like you don't have just anybody knocking him out, right? These 155ers weren't knocking him out. You really have these hard hitters, and Zombie's one of the hardest hitters. Probably, I would say, I don't know if you agree. I would say the hardest hitter in 145 is Korean Zombie.
I'd have a very difficult time mustering up an argument against you there.
Maybe Jan. Peter Jan could be there, but
maybe, but no, I still think that Zombie just has that crazy, outrageous KO power for his size.
I mean, the way he knocked out, what's his name? Oh my God. This is 145 again, right? But, who's the guy who just lost, who he had lost to Aldo? Moicano, Renato Moicano. So he had this like 40 or so second knockout against Moicano. That was just ridiculous, where Moicano threw a single jab, and it was like one of the most perfect boxing counters I've ever seen in the UFC, where he ducked under, right hand, knocked him out in like 40 seconds. One shot is all it took. And now it makes you understand why he was able to do that to Frankie as well. Pedro is not a light hitter, though. By
no means. He knocked Garbrandt out cold.
And he's got a chin. He's got a chin of iron. That chin. Okay. I mean, he took big shots against Garbrandt.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and because Pedro, he likes to get into scraps. That's how he fights. He likes that. He welcomes that back and forth because he knows he's got the chin and he's got the knockout power.
So that actually goes right into what I was going to say. I think happened in this fight. I think the story of this fight was. I'm going to agree with you, but disagree with you. I agree with you. It's all about Frankie's combos. But when you were saying 1-2, that's where I actually disagree with you. Frankie didn't throw 2-punch combos.
Oh, no. I was talking about Pedro. Frankie was throwing his 8 flurries of
what it seemed like
5-4,
Yeah, and what it seemed like what happened.
Every leg kick.
He would counter. And it seemed like what was happening is that he would just overwhelm him with numbers. And even like the first second, even the third wouldn't hit a lot of the time. They would miss, they would glance, they would go off the guard. It was always the fourth or the fifth or the sixth that would end up getting him. And what Pedro was trying to do is exactly what you were saying as well, of he doesn't mind scraps. He likes scraps. He knows he has a chin and he knows he has the power. So he was saying, okay, come in, piece me up. I don't care. I'll counter you with a big overhand and I'll get you. And he caught him a couple times, but not hard enough.
Yeah. And I mean, what it shows is, the speed of Frankie, the movement. He is so mobile. I can't imagine, like, you'd need to be an absolutely phenomenal striker to even land a punch on him, to even be able to predict his movement.
Or just be bigger.
High level.
Or be bigger, and that's the thing, right? Frankie is always fought at he's fought at 145, 155, and so that movement is what he has to do. He couldn't ever just be a guy that stands in the pocket and trades, because with guys that are 20 pounds heavier than you, you just can't do that. You're going to get knocked out. They hit harder than you, and they can catch your shots. You can't. You can't take theirs. So I mean, he has to have that movement. But what I saw Pedro also did really well. So Pedro, he had I guess 2 strategies. It was pick him apart from the outside with just jabs and leg kicks, and just keep on hitting him, and then force him basically to blitz in that classic Frankie style and counter him when he does. And it worked pretty well.
Those leg kicks were very effective. I think that on like a lesser fighter, they would have made that difference. But while they did impact Frankie's mobility, he was able to, he certainly took some losses in rounds 3 and 4, but the whole time he was never just a stationary target. What it is he was hurt, no doubt, but
he was transported right after.
Toughness.
Dude, he didn't even stay for the post-fight presser. His leg was so fucked up, he had to go to the hospital immediately.
Busted up. But it's that champion mentality, that toughness, that it's entirely in your head whether you can really push yourself. And sometimes, it can be scary when you see somebody who is, maybe being a little too tough for their own good. Look no further than Tony Ferguson and Gaethje. That was a very scary situation, I think. But Frankie he handled it like a champion. And that was the number 5 ranked man that he just beat. So it's a big question you know what, because he clearly he wants to keep going. He was mad. He wants he wants a title run. He wants to keep going.
So the Dana was asked about that. Actually, it's a very good point. But first of all, I don't think that Pedro should be dropping down very much, right? You could very easily argue Pedro won this fight.
That was a very competitive fight.
It really, I would not have complained with either decision. So when you think
didn't one of the judges count it like was it 49-46?
Oh yeah, that was weird. Someone gave Pedro 49-46, and the other two gave.
I guess I can see it. I can see judging it that way. It's not how I judged it. I do think that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I think the the first and the fifth, you could give to Pedro. You could give to Frankie. I would lean Frankie. I think at the end of the fight,
Frankie took the first. I have no problem saying that Frankie has that first round.
The second was Frankie for sure. It's the fifth. Yes. I think you could give Pedro the first, maybe. It did seem like Pedro was still hitting him harder. For me, it was like the first 2 to 2.5 minutes of Frankie's first round was all that was all Frankie. Pedro started to come back, but I think it was in Pedro's favor for the second half of the first round, but I think it wasn't as much in Pedro's favor in the second half as it was in Frankie's the first half. So I'd still give it to Frankie.
And as the fight went on, I think that it seemed, and this, while cosmetics and showing damage realistically doesn't necessarily mean a lot. Look at like Nate Diaz with all of his facial scar tissue, he opens right up. But by the end of that fight, I think that they were both putting on comparable amounts of damage to each other. But I think that by the end, Pedro was wearing the damage in a much more obvious way.
Yeah, I think he was able to eat those leg kicks well.
And it's that toughness. It's and that is important. He can stand up and take it long enough to beat you.
And
phenomenal.
What was amazing?
So
to me,
impressed.
I mean, the leg kicks especially. I mean, they were saying like most guys will drop after 2, 3, 4 of these. Frankie took them consistently, and he was still agile the entire night. His left leg, you'd see in the fourth and fifth, it started to give in a bit, but he was able to recover. It wasn't ever to a point where he wasn't fighting. But on your point about that, Frankie, his goals, right? He's going for that title shot. So Dana was actually asked specifically about that. Do you think he deserves a title shot? And Dana said maybe not right away, but 1, maybe 2 more fights, depending on who he fights. Absolutely. And on that discussion of title shot, this finally solved for me the mystery. I'm going to be honest. I was so confused. I think we've even mentioned it on a few podcasts. Why has Dana not just said, Aljo, it's you? Aljo.
Dragging his feet.
And he was dragging his feet. And I guess this was the fight that he was waiting for. He's waiting for Pedro or Frankie to have a statement. Both of them had a statement had statement performances, but not quite enough to earn anything. I'm kind of curious what Dana's thought process was, because I think maybe if Frankie had like just destroyed him, maybe you could justify that. I don't think he could have even justified a Pedro one over a Pedro shot over Aljo if Pedro had come in and destroyed him. And the reason I say that is because 2 fights ago, Pedro fought Aljo and Aljo won. So if Aljo's won Pedro's second last fight, Pedro's would be on a 2-fight winning streak with this win, with that last loss coming to Aljo, and Aljo hasn't lost since that fight. It goes to Aljo. It should go to Aljo. And Dana finally, the schmo asked Dana, now that this is done, is Aljo the next guy? And he said, yeah, it looks like it. So finally, Aljo's getting some love.
From all that I've heard, and I haven't looked too much into it, but it would appear that Dana has some kind of personal issue with Aljo. And Dana is a smart, calculating businessman, but he's also very emotional.
Yes, he cares about his relationships.
Sure, and and if you piss him off, he'll flex the power that he has, which I suppose when you're the boss of a bunch of people who can all beat the fuck out of you, you do need to kind of show them that you have a certain level of power. I mean, it's why Vince McMahon with WWE, everyone had to be as big and strong as he was to even compete. You got to be able to flex some power to these very powerful people. But yeah, he can't go further on, denying this for Aljo. And also with regards to this fight, I mean, if there's even a discussion of whether, Pedro should get the shot over Aljo.
If he won.
I mean, 'cause I think it would come into that Dana smart, savvy businessman situation of, who's going to be the more entertaining champion, who's going to,
I'm going to say Aljo. I lean Aljo on that, dude.
Yeah, Aljo is, they're both exciting. They're both exciting fighters, but Aljo is.
And here's the other thing.
Aljo
also,
is interesting to watch.
Sorry. Yeah.
Aljo, he's an interesting fighter to watch. He's got great technique, and he's a nice fella. I haven't heard very much of Pedro. He hasn't been marketed very much.
So here's the thing about Aljo. The reason that Dana, as you're right in saying that Dana had some bad feelings towards him, but I think those have actually changed. So Dana used to hate him. The reason he hated him is because he wasn't an exciting guy. He would always go for the wrestling and just grind you out, but he wasn't even like a striking kind of wrestler. He wasn't like a Khabib ground and pound destroy you, Khamzat Chimaev kind of thing. He was just a grindy guy, not even like Kamaru. And Dana was just like, dude, what are you doing? When he put him up against Pedro, this was, I believe, potentially fresh off of the Moraes knockout, but I'm not for sure about that. But when he put him up against Pedro, Sterling did not go and try to wrestle the whole fight. Sterling was fighting standing up. And I remember specifically, and he beat Pedro on the feet. And I believe, I remember Dana saying after that fight, if Sterling had fought all his other fights like this one, he'd be a huge star. So I think, and since then Sterling had that great win against what's his name? You're just looking at it. Who did he just beat? The other young up and comer, really really good guy, who actually has another fight lined up.
I can give you the last 5 wins from Aljo, or Brett Johns, Cody.
Most recent one.
It's Sandhagen.
Sandhagen, yes, Corey Sandhagen. So when he got that great rear naked choke on Sandhagen, I mean, that should have just ended it, right? And that was, he went for the grappling, but it wasn't like he grinded him out. He just jumped on his back and he killed him. So like,
listen, I think that grappling is very exciting. Granted, I mean,
depends on the type.
I'm biased. GSP's my favorite fighter of all time, so I'm real biased.
There's different types of grappling, right? Sure. Not every grappling is exciting. Like one of my favorite fighters in the entire world to watch is Bryce Mitchell, right? I think that grappling is one of the most hyped things in the world for me. I get so excited to see him just destroy guys with this really exciting jiu-jitsu, always threatening submissions, wacky submissions from every position. It's so much fun to watch. Other guys,
wacky submissions from every position. Yes. You could do some marketing for a jiu-jitsu gym.
So guys, I've just decided we're going to open a second podcast. It's going to be a jiu-jitsu podcast called Sneaky Submissions from Weird Positions.
That's phenomenal.
It's a great name.
Why are we even doing this?
All right, I guess we're going to have to cut this one short, guys. We're going to transition to the new podcast. Find us at that new YouTube. All right.
Exactly. You can hear us geniuses, high fight IQ geniuses.
Oh, yeah, jiu-jitsu experts.
High-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
All right, I think we've spoken this main event kind of to death right now. That being said, there were some awesome fights. The other fights, the big theme of the night, and Frankie obviously embodied that as well. It was an underdog night, right? We had a ton of big underdog stories. Frankie was a 2.5 to 1 underdog. We had in our co-main event a huge knockout by Mike Rodriguez over the Polish guy Marcin Prachnio. So Mikey had, I think, some of the greatest clinch work I've seen in a long time. I have not seen someone beat someone up in the clinch. I mean, Kamaru does it, but Kamaru does it much safer, methodical, slowing, just like hit you in the body, just stomp your feet, knee you in the thigh, just make you hurt. This guy came in, he went high clinch, he went elbows to the head, he went hard shots to the body.
He lays the damage.
Oh my God, he was
beating him. A guy like Kamaru wants you to feel that damage over those 5 rounds.
It was like an Overeem or a Silva.
He was trying to close the show.
But that clinch was incredible. And I mean, what was it? What kind of a favorite was he? Let's look. Best Fight Odds is the website I usually use for these things. That's unfortunate.
I gotta start putting down some bets on these fights. I'll tell you that.
I think that they took it down, but it's in the archives already. Oh, I can find the archives. There we are. So yeah, he was a plus 200 underdog. Oh, never mind. I fully apologize. The other guy was the underdog. He was actually a favorite. So that second fight was with a favorite did win. But he was found, I believe, on really short notice. The big underdog story, though, to talk about, the massive underdog story, the biggest underdog upset since Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm which was what, 2016, I think.
That sounds about right to me.
Sounds about right. Either 2016 or 2017. This is the biggest upset since then. Shanna Dobson, the plus 900 underdog, comes out and beats Maria Agapova, who was about minus 1,500 favorite. That's insane. What was really interesting to me is to hear Dana talk about it afterwards, because he was even saying, I mean, we talk mad shit about this. Dodson was a 2-3 fighter fighting against an 8-1 fighter. What are you doing? Why is this 2-3 fighter even in the UFC? Forget even on the main card.
I mean, 9-1 prior to.
Sorry, 9-1 fighter, even better. And so it looked like just an obvious thing that, of course, he would that Dodson would get destroyed. Agapova would just cut her apart in that nice
it seemed like
distance
striking to anybody.
And then Dodson just worked those takedowns, got control. She just looked good. Dana was saying that he didn't want this fight booked. And it was Mick Maynard who said, no, make this fight. I'm telling you. In fact, Mick Maynard actually said he favored Dobson to win. And Dana said, and I think this is a fantastic line. He said, just as long as you don't make us look like Top Rank. Top Rank is the is Eddie Hearn's boxing. And then, in boxing, all the fights are like 10-1 or 10-1 favorites, and basically all the fights. Every fight. That's why these guys have undefeated records.
Against cans.
That's why they have undefeated records. They teach them and they build them up very, very slowly. So he's like, don't make us look like Top Rank. And you know what? Shannon Dobson did not.
Yeah, really, remarkable. I was busy getting drunk that night in my friend's backyard, and I only got back in time for the Hubbard Selecki card onward.
Yes.
So unfortunately, I missed that one. But I mean, just the story is remarkable.
Yeah, just the story. And didn't you say someone had bet on that? Someone put big money on that fight?
Yeah, I think I read somebody won 25 grand off of that fight.
That's amazing. And 9-1. That means the guy put like $250 down.
Like I said.
Oh no, 2,500 down, and it turned into 25 grand. That's crazy.
I could have just put $1,000 on that fight and just walked away a happy man.
But the other big that you actually just mentioned, though, Joe Selecki against Austin Hubbard, and Hubbard was a hype prospect.
Impressive victory. Mm-hmm.
So Hubbard's a big prospect coming in. Selecki is also a big guy. He's had some good wins recently. What's his what are his last few fights looking like? So Joe Selecki is coming off a win. Obviously, this win. He's coming off a win over Matt Wyman as well. I believe those are his only 2 fights in the UFC. But that's not a bad start. And then to beat Austin Hubbard is just really impressive. And in the way that he did it with that really fast submission.
Oh, man, it's going to raise his profile. Yeah, I'm looking. It's difficult to even find for Selecki. I'm having a tough time finding his total record, like looking at all the people he's fought.
He's 10-2, but
only 2 fights. Only 2 fights in the UFC, though, yeah.
Exactly.
And looks like 2 wins in the UFC.
And if you look at Austin Hubbard, he's got some good wins and some losses, right? He's kind of traded. He's got a loss to he lost to Davi Ramos, who is not a guy that is that's bad to lose to. That's a very, very top level guy. In May,
right?
But then he won. He beat Kyle Prepelic, who I don't think is in the UFC anymore. Lost to Mark Madsen. Beat Max Roshkoff, and everyone knows that story about Max Roshkoff quitting on the stool. And since then, he's actually been cut from the UFC. And then he lost this fight. So he had some big hype coming in over the last little while. But it looks like his UFC career has not been quite what they expected. They had some really big thoughts about him, and he hasn't quite followed through.
Yeah, in the UFC, it's looking like his record is, loss, win, loss, win, loss. So he's going 2-3.
He goes back and forth
in his time in the UFC.
Exactly.
And I guess in his favor, besides this most recent loss, his last 2 losses have been decisions. So it's not like he's getting brutally finished.
Yeah, and there were good guys too.
His wins. This is funny. On his list of on his record, he's got a win by unanimous decision, and then his Max Roshkoff win by retirement.
Does it say that? Yeah. I mean,
it's listed as the reason by winning. He won via retirement.
Interesting.
So that's interesting. He got cut by the UFC, but
dude,
they're
he
considering
retired
that
guy.
He retired from the sport on the stool. He didn't
didn't retire from the sport. No, he's still fighting. He's still fighting. He didn't retire from the sport, but yes.
But he retired from the UFC according to the record. Yeah, I've never seen something like that. That's
no, it wasn't. No, he retired from the fight, and then he was cut from the UFC, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We did have one other big fight this weekend. We had a few big fights in Bellator. Julia Budd had a big win. Her first big win after coming off that loss against Cyborg, her only career loss in Bellator. Mm-hmm. But the Bellator main event, that was actually pretty legit. So we had of course Ryan Bader taking off. Wow, am I blanking on his name? Oh my gosh.
I could never think of Ryan Bader without thinking of Cormier's shot that he took at him, because there's a couple of shit talking lines that I remember and that I'll always remember, and that's just I want to fight the easiest fight. That was funny, classic.
So he faced off against
Vadim. I have to give to this because I did not catch this fight.
Okay, so he fought against this guy Vadim Nemkov, this big Russian dude, I believe. Again, full disclosure, I'm not a huge Bellator fan. I did hear about this in advance. I saw a lot of highlights about Vadim, and he looks like a really, really dangerous guy. So I sent you a video a few days ago, you and Adam, a video of Vadim with those chopping leg kicks. This guy has some of the scariest leg kicks I've seen since like an Edson Barboza or Justin Gaethje, but he's a light heavyweight. And he also has some really crisp striking. Everyone knows Bader's great on the feet, but Bader's a wrestler, right? So Vadim, it was a first round finish by Vadim. Vadim was just piecing him up on the feet. Bader kind of realized he was losing it was a second round, I believe, not a first round. But yeah, he was piecing him up on the feet. He looked like he was just, Bader looked old, like that older style, right? A lot more swinging, a lot more loopy, a lot more just not as smooth. And Nemkov really had some really good, clean, straight 1-2s, no real issues. Was beating Bader. Bader says, okay, tries to take him down. Manages to take him down. However, immediately Nemkov the whole time is threatening submissions. So Bader's just trying to keep him on the ground. Nemkov is going submission to submission while elbowing the guy in the head throughout the entire time. Bader couldn't get a single shot off. He took way more damage when taking Nemkov down than he actually sustained, and he inflicted on Nemkov to the point where Bader stood up and said, "Go ahead, just stand up. I'll trade with you on the feet," even though he's worse on the feet. And eventually ended up getting knocked out in the second. So it was just a brilliant move by Vadim Nemkov. But the thing that really made headlines for me was at the end of that fight, and we're going to talk about this in a second, with the Jon Jones move out of light heavyweight, retiring his belt or vacating his belt. Scott Coker.
That's got to be the biggest news of the week.
We'll talk about that in just a second. But before we get into that, Scott Coker, as a result of this fight, said that Bellator has the best light heavyweight division in the world and the best light heavyweight champion in the world, which, I mean, if you take Jon Jones out of the mix, there is no champion in the UFC. But Dana's reaction was hysterical. Dana said, wait, what do you mean? Every guy in their light heavyweight division, we let go of. Ryan Bader, they just let him go. Now we have they have the new addition of, what's his name? Corey Anderson. Exactly. UFC let him go. So it's like, yeah, you guys have some good fighters. The best of the best of the best that the UFC didn't want.
That's a ridiculous thing to say. It's their marketing on their end. But
I think actually the first thing you said, Dana said, "Oh, that's cute."
It's such a ridiculous statement. It's not even worth there's not even an argument to be had. Nobody takes a statement like that seriously.
Yeah, I don't think so. So let's go into that big news. As you said, this is by far the biggest news of the week. We'll go right into the news, and we'll start off with.
You would think that the news would be bigger. I wonder if. Okay, I just want to jump in real quick with a thought in my head.
Before you wait. I haven't even teed up the topic yet.
Okay, biggest news of the week. I think we all know the topic. Go ahead.
Jon Jones decides to vacate the light heavyweight belt, allowing Dom Reyes to fight Jan Blachowicz on the Israel Adesanya card in a month from now. for that vacant light heavyweight belt. Noah, take it away.
You get the feeling that Jon Jones has like an element of like, it's like, okay, Cormier's just retired. He didn't get the championship belt. I'm gonna slide in. I'm gonna beat you at your own game now that you're gone, and I'm gonna overshadow your retirement.
Absolutely, dude. And you can even see from his tweets after that Cormier-Stipe 3 fight, Stipe is the greatest of all time. And then he starts talking about, oh man, the two best people in the world, me and Stipe. I think actually that was what it was. Someone asked him for some of his like MMA, his Mount Rushmore people, and he put Stipe on there. So he's just digging and jabbing into DC as much as he can.
Yeah. Best thing for DC is just ignore him. Everybody knows that, Jon Jones can beat up DC, but at the end of the day, DC does not want to be Jon Jones, but Jon Jones wishes he could be DC.
DC wins in life. Jon Jones wins in fights.
Yeah, at the end of the day. But, well, that's not even true because, sometimes he juices up a little too much and then he loses the fight. Sorry.
Oh, he hasn't lost the fight yet.
He doesn't lose. So
he still wins the fight. He only had one fight taken away from him, and he still won it. Yeah, there's an asterisk, but at the end of the day, he won the fight. He might have cheated to win it, but he won the fight.
Sure. But
go ahead.
Jon Jones is it'll be interesting to see him at heavyweight. He'll I mean, look at his brothers. Those guys are all gigantic freak athletes. I mean, that transition's not going to be hard for him. In theory, I think that he'll do fine.
I think he'll do better. I think with the exception of Francis Ngannou, there's nobody that will touch him at heavyweight. I think Jon is too slippery. Jon is too fast.
You think Stipe too? You think he can?
I don't think Stipe can touch him. I think that Jon is too fast. He's way too defensively sound. Stipe has nothing that he's going to knock him out of the park with, right? He's not going to knock him out. He might be able to touch him a little bit here and there, but Jon has such a good ability to get out of range. He's got that reach advantage. I think what Luke Thomas talks about this all the time. Jon Jones, his game isn't the same as it was, but defensively it is better than that. He's gotten better and better defensively. It's just his offense has tapered off a bit, but that's a lot because he's older. He's not as crazy. He's not as risk taking. That's what happens when you get older.
You change your style.
It's the same thing. GSP was a big striker. Gets knocked out, loses to Sarah, comes back with a different style, much safer style, and dominates with it.
Undefeated for the rest of his career.
Exactly. I mean, you can talk about the that last fight or the second last fight, but
we can talk about it, but I still stand by GSP won 3 of those rounds. I watched that fight.
All right. We can talk about that another time. But so what this means though for the division, this actually is very, very interesting for the division. I guess we can talk about Jon Jones for another second or two, for another little bit. I guess I do want to say that
one interesting thing that I do want to mention with Jon Jones.
I was going to say just before you go into that about him going to heavyweight and him being such a good frame for heavyweight. Anthony Lionheart Smith actually says in his opinion, Jones was always a heavyweight that was sucking himself dry to make light heavyweight. And so he thinks he's a natural heavyweight. So I think that's also a really interesting thing to see how he fills out. I think he'll fill out really well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. I have no doubt. I want to see him take at least one dangerous bout before he gets a title shot. You know what's interesting? There was an interview recently with Verdum, and he was discussing the prospect of Jones at heavyweight, and he thinks Jones is very impressive, and he's certainly going to do well at heavyweight. He put himself out there as somebody who wants a fight with Jones.
But he's gone from the sport, from the UFC. He said already his contract
is
over.
He's kind of doing. He's playing around with free agency right now. I think that if a guy like Verdum wants a fight, they'll find a way to edge him in.
I don't think they need him. I don't think they want him that much.
Anyways, I don't think that this. I don't know if this is a fight that would happen. I don't think it's a fight that would happen. But it brought up an interesting hypothetical that I've been reading of a lot of people discussing whether Jones would be able to handle somebody with such high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and grappling at that weight class like Verdum. The big question is, can Jones keep Verdum off of him for long enough that Verdum doesn't even have the opportunity to take him down.
Can Verdum close that distance on Jon? I think that's more the story because Jon has that reach, and no one closes the distance on Jon. And everyone that fights Jon talks about afterwards how he's so much stronger than they expected as well. Everyone's like, whoa, I did not expect him to be that strong. He doesn't look strong.
That again goes back to that, like Anthony Smith, he's really a heavyweight. I don't think that people are going to be shocked by his power at heavyweight, especially not a guy.
He's not a knockout fighter anymore.
No, certainly not. I don't know. I think his style. I don't know if that cautious style is going to work for him at heavyweight, especially when you have guys like Ngannou to deal with.
You know, let's look at the division.
I think it's so interesting to see what's going to happen. I'm going to follow that very closely for sure.
All right. Well, let's look at the rankings for a second, because I personally think that the only person I can think of that could beat him is, in fact, is definitely going to be Mr. Stipe Miocic. Sorry, Mr. Francis Ngannou. Stipe, I don't think can do it. Curtis Blades has great wrestling, but I don't think his wrestling is better than Jones. I think maybe it's on par with Jones, but Jones will have the gas tank. Jones will out-survive him, and Jones would eventually beat him. Jairzinho couldn't do anything with the with that space. He couldn't close the distance. Jairzinho would not have a chance against him. And then Derek Lewis, way too plodding. Overeem maybe has a chance, but like I think
Overeem is an interesting fight.
Overeem is an interesting fight too, but I think if Jon Jones comes up to heavyweight, it's one of two things. It's either a massive, massive name. So either maybe Stipe if he loses, Ngannou if he loses, or like a Rumble or an Overeem or something, or it's a title shot. But I really do think that the plan for the UFC, I think what they want to do is Ngannou. They were hoping that Ngannou beats Stipe, and actually I don't think they actually care, because regardless of who wins that fight, a fight with Jones would be huge, right? If Stipe beat DC twice, Ngannou twice, longest reigning heavyweight champion of all time, all these things, then yeah, for sure, Stipe would be an insane fight, and everyone already is salivating over Ngannou.
Right. I think I would predict that regardless of champion status, I think that Jones' first fight at heavyweight is Ngannou. If Ngannou wins, because I think if Ngannou is champion, they're going to give him that title shot right away. If Ngannou is not champion, I think they're going to put him up against Ngannou regardless.
Okay, I would love that. I personally think it'll be a championship. I think it'll go straight for the belt personally. I don't think it matters who has the belt, but I think Ngannou, if it's not for the belt, it would be Ngannou, assuming he's not the belt holder.
I think it would be good because Ngannou, for fight fans, he's got a high profile, but for the casuals, he's no Jon Jones. I think
Ngannou is building his name, and he's so easily marketable, dude. He's so easily marketable.
A fight with Jon Jones would really put him over the edge as
and when you hear his story, dude, you know his story, right? If you can go and knock the guy well, and then he beats Jon Jones, become the best fighter of all time. He's now knocked out his last 4 fights, first round knockouts against JDS, against Overeem, was it Overeem? Sorry, it wasn't Overeem. Against JDS, against Blades, against Kane, and I forget who the fourth guy was, but those are and Jairzinho. Those 4 wins are insanity. 2 of them are legends, or 3 of them are legends, really. So Ngannou, I think, is if he can win this fight against Stipe, oh my God, he's shooting for the stars. And then
this guy's looking for him.
Let's talk about what this actually does for the rest of the division, though, because this is not just a Jon Jones thing. In fact, Jon Jones does not actually have any fights lined up at heavyweight yet, as we mentioned. But what's immediately important is that light heavyweight division. So they did announce, as I mentioned, Reyes versus Jan Blachowicz. So Dom Reyes, Jan Blachowicz will be fighting on September 23rd, I want to say, the same night as Izzy and Costa. They will be fighting for the vacant.
They're fighting
23rd,
on
26th?
The 19th.
September 19th. I think it was moved to the 26th, but regardless, it will be for the vacant light heavyweight championship belt. Now, I think that's the obvious move to make. Everyone knows those 2 guys both deserve a shot. Reyes coming off that loss to Jones that everyone thought he won. Jan coming off a series of wins. His only recent loss at all was to Thiago Santos about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. Other than that, he's had some huge wins, including over Jacare Souza, who moved up. He knocked out Corey Anderson in his last fight, so he definitely deserves it. The question that I think is important is who's next. So I don't think it matters who wins it, in fact, because none of these guys have really fought anyone. But we have 2 other fights lined up. So we have Thiago Santos against Glover Teixeira. Thiago Santos has not fought since he destroyed his own knee, leg kicking Jon Jones. And
arguably won't beat Jon Jones as
arguably beat him with one leg. So he definitely is
2 legs.
deserving.
No question he would have won.
I think
3
so too. 3 legs, so no competition. No. Glover Teixeira is coming off that big knockout, or get that really prolonged TKO over Anthony Smith.
That was devastating. That was a whole incident.
So both these guys can easily justify a title shot. On the other hand, you got Anthony Smith, not Alex Smith. Anthony Smith fighting Alexander Rakic this weekend, in fact, in the main event. It's actually a 3-round main event, not a 5-round main event, because it was only moved to main event like 2 weeks ago. And so the question, and Smith is also, Smith lost to Jon Jones. Then since then he beat Gustafsson. He lost now to Glover. However, if he can win against Rakic, that's a big win. And the only reason I think he has it, I do think that Santos and Glover do have better recent records and do have a better reason to get the title shot over Smith if he wins. However, however, Smith has a win over Santos.
Does
and that can change things, right? So because Smith has Glover, if Glover wins, it's Glover all the way, absolutely, because Glover beat Smith, and Rakic just recently lost to Volkan Ozdemir. But if Santos and Smith both win, I think you can see Smith politicking his way into it, just saying, "Hey, I beat the other guy. Clearly, I'm better than him. You should give me the shot."
Yeah, you can say, "Hey, we both lost to John. We both." We could run it back with each other,
Though, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, one other thing though that to keep in mind, I do favor Reyes, but I think Jan has a chance.
Yes.
Jan has a good chance because his wrestling is big, right?
Sure.
I think Jan definitely.
I think he's underrated with everything that top 5. Yeah.
So I think if Jan was to win, I think you have to give it to Santos anyway, because Santos has a KO over Jan Blachowicz. If Reyes,
I think it depends on how close Jan, and if Jan and Reyes is very close and very competitive, I could see them running it back right away.
I would say if Jan wins, then it's the winner of Santos and Glover, no matter what. Yeah. If Reyes wins, then it could be the winner of Santos, or it could be Smith. If Santos wins and if Smith wins, then Smith has a chance. If Glover wins and Smith wins, or Rakic wins, it'll be Glover. So there's a bunch of different options. It'll be really interesting. I think this is really good for the division that Jon Jones is leading, honestly. It gives
it's great.
Gives it a bunch of parity. Finally. It gives some chance to let the division grow, and hopefully eventually Jon Jones will come back in, let's say 3 years, 2-3 years, once he's big enough. And Adesanya might come up to light heavyweight, might go up to heavyweight. Actually, it'd be crazy.
Heavyweight. I don't know if I can picture that.
I don't like this fight because it doesn't answer the big question about Jon Jones moving to heavyweight. But what if Jon Jones's first fight at heavyweight was against a middleweight at heavyweight in Israel Adesanya? So what if you had Izzy and Jon being like, you know what? Let's fight. Let's do it at 205 and above.
That would be such a freak fight. First off, I can't picture Adesanya putting on that much weight. That puts a weird
Adesanya's spoken forever about it, dude. Adesanya's always been talking about how he's going to go up to heavyweight.
Yeah. Adesanya talks. That's what he does.
No, I actually think that Adesanya has plans to move up. He fought when he was kickboxing, he fought heavyweight. He was the same. Yeah, he hasn't lost weight. He's always fought big guys. That's how he's always gone up and down weight classes. He's been talking about fighting Stipe for a long time. I actually would favor him over Stipe personally. I don't say I favor him over Jon. But over Stipe, I think Izzy could beat him.
I'll tell you one thing: he's definitely not getting any smaller.
Izzy's not getting smaller, that's for sure. And
not knowing to move, but up.
Look, if he puts some weight on, hits the gym. He's got a heavyweight frame, right? He's big. He's skinny.
Yeah, big, long.
We did have. I don't know. Is there anything else we want to mention about the light heavyweight division, or?
I think it's great. I think that this is a real historical moment. When's the last time people have had a conversation of, oh, well, if this guy wins and becomes a champion, well, then now we have another fight lined up, or these two guys could potentially become the champions. it's just been Jon Jones for years. And Jon Jones is remarkable. He is a remarkable fighter. God, I hate him. God, how does anybody actually like him? He's the worst. He's the least deserving guy of any kind of accolade. Yeah. So I'm glad he's gone. I'm glad that we can see some fresh meat. And at the same time, I mean, look at his last few fights. It's clearly Jon Jones for years has been operating above the capabilities of, other fighters, period in the UFC. But, time is the great equalizer. People are catching up to his level of skill. People are able to really work and manipulate their own bodies so that they're coming in with as much of a physical advantage as they can relative to Jones, who arguably has like the greatest physical advantages in terms of frame in the entire UFC. So, time is the great equalizer. I think that Jones, there's definitely something to be said because for him, it's all ego. And there's something to be said for him. He sees what's happening. He sees that he's losing a step. And I mean, listen, there's no question in my mind that Jon Jones wakes up every morning and Googles his own name to see what people are saying about him, especially after he fights. So if everybody thinks he's losing a step, there's no question. He's achieving a lot of good things for his ego right now. I mean, he's finding a way to indirectly beat Cormier. And he could possibly do quite well.
So look at the timing on this. Look at the timing on this. When did Jon Jones announce this? Sunday or Monday, right? I think it was Monday. Monday, Jon Jones announces this. What happens Monday? It's the first day that they have podcasts. Like most podcasts. I mean, our podcast is special, right? We're great. We want to bring the show to you guys as soon as we possibly can. So we come out on Sundays. But
we're not slackers like that. Ariel Helwani,
whatever his name is. I don't.
There's one thing when I think of Ariel Helwani, slacker, lazy.
So he knows that Ariel has his podcast. He knows that Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell have their morning combat episode on Monday. Monday is a big day for MMA podcasts. So everyone's going to talk about what happens with DC. DC is a big topic coming out of that last week. However, when Jon Jones says, "Hey, by the way, I'm dropping my light heavyweight belt," you're taking all that air right out of that DC balloon that everyone's talking about his retirement. It's a huge moment for the sport. And he's like, nope, let's make it about me.
But I don't think he's completely succeeded. I think his move, I think from what I've seen, I think that with like the general population of UFC watchers, the casual fan, I think that this Jon Jones news has been actually a lot I think that it's been relative to other Jon Jones movements. It's been, pretty quiet. I don't know.
I disagree. I've seen it a lot. I mean, I'm pretty keyed in. So maybe that's just because I look for it, but I've seen this everywhere. I think that's what everyone's talking about. You even said biggest news of the week.
I think that if you're talking to your average Joe fan who maybe just tunes in for like a main event, I would wager that more people are currently aware of Daniel Cormier retired and had his final fight as opposed to, Jon Jones is moving up to heavyweight.
Okay, but I mean, the people that are listening to these podcasts are the hardcores, right? So, sure. But yeah, that is a good point. We had a ton of other really, really big fight announcements. So let's talk. First of all, Colby Covington against Tyron Woodley has finally been booked. They've been working on that fight for 4 years? I know what you're thinking. You know what? I'm going to let you go, talk your shit, and then I'm going to tell you why I disagree with you. Go for it.
I think that I saw one. I don't even need to talk my shit. I saw one comment on Reddit that really sums it up.
Yep.
If Woodley can't will himself to fight against a man he genuinely dislikes and has a personal problem with, if he can't motivate himself to actually do anything there, what can he motivate himself to do in the octagon? Okay. Why is he even stepping in there anymore? I mean, it seems like he from the moment he starts his walkout, I could just his last fight, from the moment you see him walking out, I could tell just looking him in the eyes, like, this is the last place in the world that he wants to be. It's like he's hoping that he's just going to walk into the octagon and suddenly it's going to be like, oh, right, this is that feeling. This is what drove me. It's gone. It
sounds like what Adesanya was saying about Whitaker when he fought him. He said he looked like Whitaker was trying to hype himself up. Like he was overcompensating kind of thing. I mean, look, people shit on Woodley. At the end of the day, you got to remember the guy's only actually had 2 bad fights. Yeah. I mean, yes, he had slow fights against Thompson, slow fights against Mma, but he had to, right? He fought those fights smart, and he was winning.
He's got that explosivity, but he, in general, outside of that explosivity, he's always been very methodical.
I mean, when he has to be. But I mean, obviously there was a big difference between that and what he was against Kamaru. I mean, he was better against Burns than he was against Kamaru. He had more, I guess, output, more ability to throw something back against Gilbert, but he still looked, as you said, still frozen, kind of like he did against Kamaru.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the question is, I mean, sometimes you would say, what is the sometimes there's a point where suddenly a fighter's too old. Suddenly it just happens and it is fall off, or suddenly, but at the same time, I'm going to be honest, they're giving him the top of the top. They're giving him the worst matchups they can. I mean, if you look at Kamaru and Herbert Burns, these are probably the only 2 guys that can keep up with Woodley both on the feet and on the ground.
Yeah.
I think that Colby might be able to keep up with Woodley's, will put the pressure on Woodley in terms of output. But I think Colby is a worse striker in terms of fundamentals. I think he's a worse striker in terms of defense. I think Woodley will beat him on the feet. And Woodley's a lot more of a power wrestler. Colby's a grinder, and I think that's a really interesting fight. But it's a tough fight for Woodley after his last 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fights have been real tough.
Woodley has to know that he has something to prove here. I mean, the fact that he's even stepping in there, I mean, says something, I guess. I mean, maybe he's just contractually obligated, and that's why he's still doing this. But he's really given me nothing to be particularly excited for. I'm completely prepared for this to be a run back of Colby and Lawler of just high pressure domination.
I can see
and no output from Woodley. I think anybody who's going to be fighting, especially somebody who's fought, like, you know, they both lost to Usman. They both know, like, what a fighter of that caliber bring to the table.
Yeah.
I don't see a route forward for Woodley here. But here's the thing. I mean, it's the classic story. How many aged former champions do you see where it's like Jose Aldo's a good example. Oh, he's got like a bunch of losses in a row, but they're all the absolute killers. Weidman was another one. He's got a bunch of losses, but they are 2 killers.
It's like the Till situation.
If he loses to Colby, you have no choice but to scale him back. You give him somebody who's like maybe somewhere between the top 15 and the top 10.
No, I think you give him a number 8. No, you give him like a number 7, number 8. I don't think you have to go that far back.
Well, let's see the welter, because welterweight is so dangerous too. Like every single one of these guys.
But look, when you're fighting Gilbert Burns, Kamaru Usman, and Colby Covington, literally the last 3 guys to fight for that belt, when you take out George Masvidal, I mean, like, and I think he beats Masvidal, by the way. But like, when you look at who they're putting him up against, they're giving him the worst possible matchups for him. The thing is about Woodley, though, I mean, he is old. If he doesn't win this, there's not much of a way back for him. The question I have for you is, why is the UFC putting this together? So I have a few different angles I want you to think about, and I guess pick one or 2. So I think one thing is just, hey, it's just a big fight. Colby and Woodley, they already have the beef. We've done all the work. All the marketing has been done for years. It's an easy thing. Put it together. Just let it do it.
It's
option two. We all know that the UFC doesn't like Woodley. We all know Woodley doesn't like the UFC. They gave him a really, really bad matchup They gave him a terrible matchup to begin with in Leon Edwards. That didn't come true. So they said, okay, we'll give you another really bad matchup in Burns. All right, you lost that. We'll give you another really bad matchup now in Colby. So are they just trying to fuck Woodley and potentially option C, maybe it's a combination of B and C, build Colby back up off of this big beef, and while also being able to just really smush Woodley's face into the ground?
They've got a really tough. It's kind of tough for them with marketing with Colby with that option, because they're obviously going to be very calculated with it, especially knowing that Colby has this whole character persona out. And, you know, I'm not trying this is not a political podcast, so we're not trying to get political, but Colby's whole shtick is, falling into politics, so it's going to come up.
It's trigger.
Like,
his trick is to trigger. He knows if he triggers, he gets headlines.
Mm-hmm. If Trump loses, like, where does that leave him? Where does that leave his character?
Nah, I think he's still him. But that's actually a really good point. I mean,
is he just going to start rooting for whatever Republicans in charge?
No,
is he going to just jump onto whatever other people hate? Like,
no, because that whole Trump train is a whole cultural thing now, right? So you can definitely still do that. Sure, he doesn't need to necessarily put Trump's name. He doesn't need to say Trump's name anymore, but he can still go for the same quote unquote values and whatever.
Sure, he's gonna go. Yeah.
I'm just really curious. I mean, I don't know why. Honestly, now that we're bringing him up, I don't know why we've been focusing on Woodley on this. In my opinion, the much more interesting question is Colby Covington. I mean, this guy is a guy who has only lost twice. His first win was a while ago, but he's flattened everybody, outpressured everybody, and he's so
phenomenal. He is
a only recent loss,
champion quality fighter.
And his only recent loss is to the champion. It was a close fight that he could have won. And maybe if he hadn't broken his jaw, but of course that was Kamaru's doing.
A lot of people, I've heard a lot of people say that he was, and I can't recall, but he was actually, like, Colby was actually ahead on the.
No, he was behind. I think he was.
Okay, so that was tied.
It was tied on one. It was tied on one card, and he was down on the other two. I think he was down 3-1, and it was 2-2 on the other one. So either way, he would have lost.
I thought that was a weird thing to read. I recall.
Yeah, no.
Usman was relatively comfortably outboxing him.
Yeah, so Usman was, but I mean, so you always have the questions about the chin when a guy takes a knockout loss, but especially with a broken jaw.
A knockout loss where you break your jaw.
And however, he has 9 months to recover. Right, he's fighting September, I think 13th or something, maybe 12th, and that knockout came in December. So it's a 9-month layoff, maybe even a 10-month layoff. So that is really good, right? He gets what he needs. And so I think he will be back to his old self. I do expect him to have recovered. I think this is enough time. I think it's really he took this time off. I'm really glad they did not.
He hasn't taken enough heavy losses that I'd be worried about him coming back.
Yeah,
looking like watched.
I obviously lean Colby on this one. I would really like to see if he can come back up to his old form, and then we can maybe see some really exciting fights. I'd love to see if he wins this fight. In my opinion, the fight to make is Colby Masvidal. If Colby beats Woodley,
that sounds like that fight. Now that
makes perfect sense, right? Because Colby, everyone knows Colby is marketed off hate, right, and off bullshit beef. Well, we all obviously he was in a big beef with Usman, big beef with Woodley. If he beats Woodley, we already know the insane amount of beef he has with George. And it makes sense ranking wise, right? They'll both be coming off losses to the champion.
Yikes!
That's the perfect fight to make. That makes sense. So I think that
makes a lot of sense. I think that Jorge could really give Covington a run for his money in the boxing department, and then he's got that phenomenal wrestling defense that he showed against Usman.
Man. I don't know, and these guys do. That's what's so exciting.
Right, that is compelling.
George and Colby know who's better. They know who was winning those rounds, and yet they're both still going for it.
Honestly, my question is why they're even making this Covington versus Woodley fight. It should have been Masvidal versus Covington to begin with. It only makes.
I think Masvidal is taking some time off. I actually agree with it because
that's the only reason I can see that happening.
I think it's that Masvidal wants some time off, but also I think Masvidal obviously is going to be in mega fights, and I don't think the Colby fight is a mega fight until Colby gets a win. If Colby gets a win, especially off a guy like Tyron Woodley, especially with all the hype they're going to build around that, Colby will come out a bigger name, and then it'll make sense to make the Masvidal fight.
I get that. That does make sense. That is some 3D marketing right there.
Other really hype news that came out last night. So in that post-fight presser, this was a really, really entertaining little exchange between the reporter and Dana. Dana said, so the reporter was saying that Tony Ferguson has been talking. He's been announced saying that he has a fight coming up. And he said, and is that true? Dana said, yes, it is. So he asked, can I guess who it is? And Dana said, yeah, you can guess. And he asked immediately Dustin Poirier. And he said, probably. And literally, journalists, you can hear the journalists get excited from that. There is nobody on this earth that has watched Justin Gaethje, that has not watched Tony Ferguson and Dustin Poirier fight that does not want to see those two. That is one of the craziest matchups I think I will ever see in my life.
Yeah, wow, what an exciting fight.
what do you even have to say? We're just talking about fights that sell themselves, fight after fight. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be explosive. There's going to be we're going to see some crazy, at least one Tony Ferguson somersault escaping like flurries. God, what a fight. I think for that one, Tony is going to he'll have to take it to the ground, because I think that Poirier boxing is, although what really got Tony, it's the pressure. The pressure is important, but it was the power of Gaethje that really took down Tony at the end of the day. And Poirier, he doesn't have the same power as Gaethje. Very few people have that same power.
But he has the toughness of anybody.
Oh, he has the toughness.
Nobody's tougher than
remarkably skilled boxing, extremely accurate, very good technique.
And good BJJ. He has good BJJ, by the way. He doesn't use it often, but it's.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, look, he almost choked out Khabib. That was
he almost got the guillotine. That's right.
That was like the most dangerous moment anyone's ever seen. Khabib, like the closest we've seen to losing. So that is true, but that's an interesting one. I don't want to see Tony go on a 2-fight losing streak.
I don't want to see either of those guys lose, man. I can't watch Poirier lose. I can't watch Tony lose. I love those guys so much. But I mean, it's still such. So what happens with the winner? I think that's really interesting, because let's assume that Khabib wins. That's a big if. Big assumption to make. Let's assume Khabib wins. Now you're talking either the winner of Tony versus Poirier. If it's Poirier, I don't think they give him another shot. I don't think there's a chance there. But if Tony wins, I think there's now a debate between Tony and GSP. If Tony beats Poirier and Khabib's still the champion, Tony deserves that title shot. If I'm being honest, I don't think it happens.
You said GSP. What
I'm saying if Tony beats Poirier, Tony deserves the next title shot. But Khabib has been talking about GSP. He says if he wants to beat Gaethje, beat GSP, and retire. So the question is, do you give it to Tony or GSP? I think the right thing to do is give it to Tony. I think the thing that the UFC is going to do is give it to GSP.
Yeah, they'll do anything to bring GSP back into the fold. The thing is, a GSP versus Khabib fight, I don't think that's taking place at 155. I don't think that's taking place at 165.
I actually do think it'll be 155 still. I think it'll be better for GSP's legacy.
GSP is humongous.
Have you seen his recent? Dude, I've never seen him so cut before.
He is fully. He's the guy that, and no matter who you talk about, though, they always say, just looking at the shape he's in, how actively he still trains, he's like one of the guys where you still just throw him back into the fold.
Absolutely.
And he will potentially take over.
Now, if Gaethje wins, that's even more interesting, because if Gaethje wins, you have essentially 3 options. You can do the rematch, Gaethje and Khabib 2. I think that's the most likely to happen. I think they'll probably give Khabib an immediate rematch. But and if Tony wins, I don't think Tony gets a title shot. I think if Gaethje wins and Khabib loses, they either do Tony Khabib or they do Gaethje Khabib 2. Or Poirier beat Gaethje. Yeah. Poirier is the last man. The only man that is actively in the UFC. Gaethje has 2 losses: one to Eddie Alvarez, who's no longer in the UFC, and one to Dustin Poirier. Poirier is the only UFC fighter to ever beat him. If he beats Khabib and Poirier beats Tony, I think they should make the Poirier-Gaethje fight. The Poirier-Gaethje 2. Yeah. Let Gaethje get, and I think Gaethje will want it too, right? He has big respect for Poirier. He wants that fight back. He's a huge competitor. And of course, it's an amazing fight. That first fight was insane.
I think that's a very compelling fight to make. I'd love to see them right back, the 2 of them, especially now that Gaethje has that new champion mentality. That I'm here to more than just have fun. I'm here to win these fights consistently, and raise my profile and become the champion. So I think that is such an inch fight. God, what a meat grinder that light. All the way down that top 10.
It's just so scary.
Are just some of the scariest
and dude, so
toughest people
on that note, in fact, we have another newcomer into that division. So we know Michael Chandler is going to be in discussions with Dana. Dana's said numerous times he's very interested in talking to him. I would love to see him join. But in addition to that, then we have a couple more fight announcements that were made. I want to go through these a bit quicker because we've been spending quite a while on them.
Sure, this is
but the one about 155 that's relevant is we do have Islam Makhachev finally fighting, and he's fighting over a former 155-pound champion, moving back down from 170 in Rafael dos Santos. RDA is back at 155 after 2.5 years out at 170. He's taken some great wins. He's beaten Kevin Lee. He's beaten some really, really top-notch guys, but he has also lost only to the top level. So Islam Makhachev against RDA is a fantastic fight. It'll really, really test Makhachev. He's a surging contender, and that is of course going to be on that fight card with his brother Khabib. So Khabib is going to be on the Khabib card, and I think that's a really, really, really exciting fight. We also had a Megan Anderson getting her title shot now on December 12th against Amanda Nunes, the Lioness, the GOAT. And we have Till Hermansson scheduled on December 5th. So which one of those, I guess, stands out most to you? We have RDA, Islam Makhachev, Till Hermansson, Amanda Nunes, Megan Anderson.
It's probably going to be the RDA, Islam Makhachev. I think. I mean, Till's always a good fight. It's good to see him having such a quick turnaround after his last fight. And none of those fights are bad. And it's just like, with Nunes, it's like predetermined outcome.
Yeah, Megan Anderson is not going to touch Nunes. Megan Anderson is not scary enough. I'm going to watch her put a
beating on some people. It's going to be, definitely, her division needs to develop more over time. Like, how is nobody finding a way to?
So here's the thing:
to get through her.
I think they've been actually doing this thing really well, because once she became champ, what that actually allowed. Usually, this is the bad thing, but I think in this very, very rare occasion, it's a good thing that she doesn't defend the belt as often because she has two belts, so she has to go back and forth. So she actually hasn't defended 135 since December of last year. Now she just fought and beat. That was against GDR, if you remember, Jermaine Durandamy. And she just beat Felicia Spencer. And now she'll be fighting Megan Anderson at both fights at 145, which means that it'll be a full year once she fights for that 145-pound belt. When she defends the second time, it'll be a full year since she'll have defended the 135 belt, which means at the time she's back at 135, it'll be maybe 16 months, 17 months. That's some good chance for this kind of a slow, not super exciting division to kind of start building some more contenders, figuring itself out, letting some girls develop, because what keeps on happening, I think, is that these girls are getting better and they're on that positive trajectory, but there's not enough girls to keep fighting to move up to the level of Amanda. And so you just, or Valentina. So you get to, like, maybe you need to be at a 10 to fight them, and they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then this 8 through 9 doesn't exist. They just have to jump up, and no one's ever ready for it. If people have a chance to really develop their skills, I think it'll help the divisions a lot.
Absolutely. It's just going to take time. I mean, if you look at some of the first UFC fights in the men's divisions, you just see over time the development of the skills, the more well-roundedness, the toughness, the different mentalities that you have to hold. It's just a matter of the development of the sport. And I mean, we can jump into a whole lot of sociology and certain things of, recently now we're pushing these women athletes to the highest levels to fight. And over time, the skills will, all come to match people like Amanda Nunes. We're going to see much more champion caliber fighters come out over this,
I mean, when was the first women's UFC fight?
That was,
it was Ronda Rousey, of course. It was 2012. It was 2012, Rousey versus Carmouche. So, I mean, it's been less than 10 years. This has been around, women's MMA, or women's UFC at least, has been around for 8 years.
How long? When was Pride started? I mean, you've had
late 90s, what, 97?
UFC
I feel like
fights.
97, 98, where they had MMA fights. So we've had 2, 3, 4 times as long for. I mean, of course, women's MMA didn't start when the UFC started. Women's divisions, but it really exploded, right?
There's physical discrepancies between men and women when it comes to athleticism.
No, I think it's just. I don't think it's even that. I just think it's the fact that we started women's division so much later, so they're just earlier in their time. I think the women's division of today is like the men's division of 2007, 2008. Where they're good, but in 10 years we'll see the women way better than they are now. And when I'm watching Contender Series,
Here and there.
So a lot of the women on that show have been saying, I'm the new generation. I started watching Ronda Rousey. I started watching this person, and that inspired me to get into MMA.
Oh, the women that I've seen in the Contender Series and the few fights that I have seen on there, they've been seriously impressive fights. So, yeah, it's just going to take development. And, it really does mirror the early MMA scene, with those early fights, with regards especially to the specialists. Ronda Rousey was specifically a specialist.
Very good point.
Holly Holm was specifically a boxing specialist.
It's kickboxing, but we still see now.
Sure.
What's her name? There's a 115-pound girl who's a ridiculous wrestler who has a neck injury. She's a huge specialist, and she's been on her way up, undefeated. Oh, what's her name? Sorry, go ahead, though.
I'm not sure, but then, I think that you'll see the tops of the divisions. You obviously have the most well-rounded, highest skill fighters. And as time goes on, we're just going to get more and more of them, and the divisions are going to be, it's going to be much more competitive. And I guess
Suarez. Sorry.
Nunes is going to have to, the Nuneses of the world are going to have to watch out because, people are gunning for him.
They've
been doing great so far.
They got to be smart, right?
I don't see the Amanda Nunes UFC story ending with her undefeated retirement. She's not undefeated.
I'm not sure.
I don't think her champion run will end with an undefeated retirement. I think she's going to keep going because she hasn't taken damage. She's fresh as ever out there. She's no signs of slowing down. She looks like she's getting better and better. But one day, she's going to lose.
One day, the game catches up eventually, right? The game catches up to everybody. I think that might be. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it depends on how much longer she goes for. If she goes more than 3 years, I agree. Under 3 years, I don't. All right. Before we go, before we leave, we do definitely deserve this fight card this weekend. Definitely deserves some recognition. So to be honest, the main event is a good main event. It's a good fight. I don't think it's an amazing main event. It's a decent kind of, fight night main event. It's nothing crazy. We have Anthony Smith against Alexander Rakic. That is a really good fight, though. Smith is coming off that beating against Glover, but other than that, he hasn't lost other than Jon Jones, which is okay.
Beat that robber.
Rakic was a really big hyped prospect because he has huge power. He's kind of that typical light heavyweight, fast, explosive, dynamic, huge power. Maybe not super, super, super technical, but pretty technical, just big, explosive, tough guy for the first round. I think if this goes into the second and third round, I give it to Anthony for sure. But in the first round, I would say Rakic is going to win this. He has that one loss against Volkan Ozdemir in the UFC. Other than that, I believe he's undefeated.
Yeah.
It's one of the most vicious knockouts I've seen in a long time against Jimmy Manuwa with that insane head kick. I don't know, that retired Jimmy Manuwa. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, maybe I have. I'm not sure, but most of it. He's got 9 wins by knockout, only 2 by decision, 1 by submission. So it's going to be an explosive night to be sure.
I'm going to definitely
experience difference between these guys.
Yeah.
Smith has 33 wins, 15 losses versus
48
12
fights.
and 2.
48 against 14.
Smith's been around the block, man.
I honestly lean Smith on this one for sure. I am going to call Smith, and this is just to point out, this is a 3-round main event because this was only promoted to main event a few weeks ago. I believe it was supposed to be headlined by, I think this might have been the Romero against Uriah Hall card. I'm not completely sure about that, but that might have been what was the main event was supposed to be.
Yep.
In our co-main event, yeah. And I think by the way, that 3-round favors Rakic, if anything, not Smith. Smith would have destroyed 5 rounds. The co-main event is also pretty hype. We have Robbie Lawler. This is the old guys fight, but both these guys are good guys. Robbie Lawler against Neil Magny. Robbie's coming off a bit of a bad little streak. Few losses. He had that loss against Askren. He had that loss against Colby.
Controversial loss. I feel like you can't. It's hard to even mention that loss.
He went out and Askren alleviated it.
Yeah, it's just it's
even
weird.
Dan Hardy, even Dan Hardy
right
in his
away.
video.
I think it looked very much. I thought he was out. It's just then seeing him just burst up and be like.
So here's what happened. Dan Hardy talks about that.
I think he was going out. I think for sure if they didn't end the fight, that choke was staying. He wouldn't have fought out.
So here's the thing. So Dan Hardy was saying there's a difference between blood chokes and air chokes. Air chokes, you're not going to be able to jump right back. Blood chokes, it's real quick. in and out. The second the blood comes back to the brain, you'll wake up. When the blood is
I figure
cut,
it feels
cut
like,
off, you won't.
getting a head rush and you fall down.
So here's the thing, though. So he had that choke, and there was about a second and a half when Herb was coming in. So that hand dropped. Herb started coming in, and then he let go. And it was what I think happened, and this is what Dan Hardy was saying. Askren let a little bit of the pressure go, which let that blood come back to the head, and then he came back. And you don't even know.
But the fight finished.
And Robbie doesn't even know he was out. He won't know that you went out.
Oh yeah, no way. You're there and then you're gone.
But if you see that hand fall, you can't tell me he's awake. That was not intentional.
Yeah.
That hand fell hard.
Yeah.
Either way, he has those. He's coming off 3 straight losses actually.
3 losses, yeah.
Against RDA, against Ben Askren, and then against Colby.
Devastating loss against.
He did beat Donald Cerrone. He lost to Tyron Woodley. He beat Condit, but now we're going all the way back to 2016.
And a bunch of his last few wins are really a bunch of the old school crowd. You know, you got Carlos Condit, Rory McDonald, Johnny Hendricks.
But look at the year. Noah, this is when he was champion.
Yeah.
Right. This is the guy he's been champion.
It's been a while for him since he's been truly successful.
On the other hand, Neil Magny hadn't fought since 2018, but he had since he had been knocked out by Santiago Ponzinibbio in 2018. But in this year, he's fought twice already. This will be a 3rd fight this year. He's undefeated this year. First with a big win over the Leech, Li Jingliang, and then another great win. Actually, a beautiful win against Anthony Rocco Martin. I think he looked really, really good in both of those. Neil Magny is a force to be reckoned with. He's a surging guy. I think Robbie's a good big name for him to come up against. I don't think Robbie's in the right part of his career. He's coming off a lot of losses, getting older. He just doesn't look as good anymore.
Yeah.
I lean Neil, but I think Robbie can always bring out that toughness. He's one of the most durable individuals I've ever heard.
Oh, yeah. He can still just stand as long as, last fight he got out pressured, but he didn't really have an opening where you can even go because Colby is that good. I want to see Robbie fight some less tough competition and just see him getting some dirty scraps. That's all I want to see from him. That's all I want from him is I just want to see him throw those hands, cause some damage and have fun out there.
Yep.
He's not going to be champion.
Yeah.
Just let him have fun, let him make his money, and let me be entertained.
That's true. I mean, I think he's not going to go anywhere. He's not going to be champion again. But I think, he's still a good fighter. He wants to stay around, still make some money. You do you, man.
Yeah.
Another notable fight. I mean, it's more of a notable. I think Alexa Grasso's is a notable fighter. I think she has some. She's very, very young. She's fast. She's got incredible boxing. She's a boxing background. I think she's from Mexico as well, and the UFC is looking to push some Mexican fighters as well. Pushing to that market. So that's a fight to look out for against Ji-Yeon Kim, who's a pretty good Korean fighter. But the fight that stands out to me, this is the 3rd time this rematch has been booked in 2020. They fought first, I believe, I think it might have actually been the Israel Adesanya Yoel Romero card, but I'm not sure about that. Don't quote me on that. Magomed Ankalaev, Ion Cutelaba. We've spoken about this before. They were supposed to fight on that first card. They fought once. Magomed, I thought, was beating him up on the feet. Cutelaba got caught a little bit, pretended to be out, was trying to bait him in, and the ref called the fight, and he immediately started yelling at the ref. He was clearly okay, trying to goad him in. They first rematched. They first were supposed to rematch on the original Khabib Tony card, which we all know got canceled. Then they were supposed to rematch just a few weeks back, and one of them ended up testing positive, unfortunately, for coronavirus. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this fight finally happens. It'll be on the main card. It's not. I think it could be the co-main event, but you have good main event. You have a good welterweight co-main. So I think, this is just a really, really fun fight that everyone is going to enjoy.
Yeah, the whole main event, very solid main event. Very excited for those fights.
Last one fight I want to mention is the headliner of the prelims, and that is Maki Pitolo coming up against Impa Kasanganay. Kasanganay has never fought in the UFC. I think you did a
good job with that pronunciation.
Yeah, it's Kasanganay. And the reason I can say the name, though, is because I watched the Contender Series just about I think it was just 2 weeks ago. It was 2.5 weeks ago. So he was actually supposed to fight on this past week's card. They moved this fight to this coming week's card instead. But Kasanganay fought on about just 2.5 weeks ago on the Contender Series, earned himself a contract and said, I am going to fight whenever you want. Dana said, are you sure? He said, yep. He said, all right, 2.5 weeks, you got you a fight. Here's your contract. And he's fighting another Contender Series alum in Maki Pitolo. Maki's had a decent start. I think he's 1-1 or maybe 2-1 in the UFC so far. So he's not too bad. He's an exciting fighter. He goes for those body shots. Watch out for the Maki Pitolo body shots. If he wins this fight, I think that might be the way he does it. He calls them his coconut bombs. He's a teammate of Max Holloway. They train together in Hawaii. So the coconut bombs, as he calls them.
Good. Always tough to watch some brutal body shots. So, well, maybe tough's the wrong words. Fun. That's the right one. So I'm excited for that. I just want to throw, looking at their records, the one whose name is harder to pronounce.
Kasanganai. Impa.
That's the one. Just want to throw out there that I think his only loss is against a guy whose last name it's an amateur loss.
Literally
against a guy whose last name is Battle. This guy needs to end up on the UFC.
That doesn't count.
Your last name is Battle. You're a fighter. I want to see that guy in the UFC one day. That's all I'm saying.
I personally love the name Boston Salmon. I think that was a great name. Great name. One, yeah. By the way, just as a little shout out to Boston, who is no longer in the UFC. He just got knocked out a couple weeks ago, absolutely brutally, by when he was down, and the guy literally ran across the octagon and threw a flying knee to a downed opponent and knocked him out brutally. It was horrible. So he won Boston won the fight by DQ, but I mean, that's a rough one.
Despicable. That was a rough one. Yeah, yeesh. Yikes, didn't see that.
And on that note, I will say there was one other fight that you wanted to mention, just because of the names as well. You had on our very first prelim fight coming up this weekend is a gentleman.
Yes, with while we're on the topics of great names, let me open up my list again. You have Sean Brady fighting Pop Sensation. Well, I guess the brother of the Pop Sensation, Christian Aguilera.
How about Christina? No, how about his sister, Christina? Literally, if you just turn his name into a girl's name, it's Christina Aguilera.
Yeah, I think that's great. I have nothing else to say about that. That just tickles me greatly to see Christian Aguilera fighting.
And again, instead of Tom Brady, got Sean Brady. Also his brother. We got some I know you said that. So I'm saying we got some siblings of we got the celebrity siblings fighting.
Amazing.
2 siblings of celebrity.
We're back to World Series of Celebrity Wrestling or whatever you call it.
Dude, it's basically Bellator.
Basically, we're getting there, and we're getting to that point.
Oh God, I really hope not.
I think we're fine. So there's one to look out for, Christian Aguilera.
I will make sure. You know what? I'm gonna tune in just at 6 p.m. Right at the very beginning to make sure I catch Christian Aguilera. Maybe some let him sing the anthem. Throw some smoke, you know. Maybe sing the anthem. Exactly, that'll be great. All right. Anything to add on to this week, Noah, before we say our goodbye?
No, it's been a surprisingly, I thought last week, looking at the card this week, we weren't going to have a lot to talk about, but it's been a big news week, and wouldn't you know it, last night's card is a bit of a low-key banger.
It was a banger.
So there you go.
I think that's
got nothing else. That's a lot of news.
Note. Yeah, it's a perfect way to end the show, I think. That being said, as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We will be back next week with another great episode, hopefully with the whole trio. And of course, we will potentially throw out some clips from this week's episode or some other little videos throughout the week. So keep tuned, stay tuned for that. And I guess
a really good thing to say at the end of the video after somebody's watched the entire podcast, you can go back and watch some clips.
Okay, fine, but we will upload some extra little videos. If we have some big news to talk about, maybe we'll jump in for a 10-minute discussion sometime and release a video.
Absolutely.
If this video gets 10 likes, we'll do it.
That sounds really, really ambitious.
All right, guys. We will talk to you next week. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great week.
Good talking to you, buddy.